So we're going to talk a little bit about some 2D transformations, and one that people have a hard time visualizing is transform origin, because the origin of the object is basically the point that the animation revolves around. And the best way to illustrate this is to use rotate. And right now, transform origin is in the middle. So when I rotate this box, it's going to kind of revolve around the middle. Let me reload here. Yeah, so you can see it's kind of spinning around the middle. Now, if I change the origin point and I drag, well, now it's not spinning around the middle. Looks like it's more on this corner. So let's change it again. And now it's just a wild box, but you can kind of get a feel for how origin point affects the transformation in 2D animation. Okay, so if you want it to always go from the middle, transform origin should be 50-50. Okay, that is the middle. And then the degrees also affect how it rotates, or the ending location. So you can see that the degrees are changing as we rotate our box here. So I've tried to include a lot of examples because that is how you learn this. Okay, so here's the original position. This is what translate 300 and -10 does. So 300 moves it to the right, and -10 is moving it down. Okay, this is what skew looks like, and basically if something is skewed, the top and bottom, or left and right borders, are slanted, and you can kind of see that here. And here you slant by degrees. So I've included all sorts of links to the W3C Learn site because these are all interactive. So you can change these coordinates, and you can kind of ignore the prefixed ones. And you can see that how that changed, just changing my X coordinate. Now let me change my Y one. And what if I make it negative? It should go up. Yep, I made it too negative. So we'll reload this. -10. Okay, so you can kind of see how that works. I would encourage that you play with these. Go into each one, adjust the settings, hit run. If it messes up the display, just reload the page and try it again. And that brings us down to our next hands-on. And we are going to be doing 2D animation on 3 different files. So we are going to be downloading Rotating Box, and a lot of the code is put in there for you. So you are going to be primarily focusing on the animation. So we're going to download this into our Lesson 9 folder. We'll go ahead and download the other ones as well. And then once you have those downloaded, we're going to start by opening up Rotating Box. And I got to find them in here. So we are going to open this for editing. Okay, so you can see that right now we have an ID called the box, and that is creating our little box. And we've applied the ID here. So let's go ahead and view this as is. There is no animation in this right now, so it's basically not going to do anything. So we are going to be applying the animation that actually makes it move. So let's go back into VS Code. And what we need to do is tell it, when we point at the box, what do we want the box to do? Well, when we point, we want it to move. So that requires using translate. And when the box displays, we also want it to rotate. Now, we don't want it to rotate when we point. We want it to do it automatically when the box displays. So this again is a transform command. But when it displays, we want it to rotate 90 degrees. That would be when we first see the box, it will be at an angle. And then when we point, we want it to move. Now you'll notice that when we point in our hover state, we're not saying that the box should be rotated. So what is going to happen is that it's going to appear rotated. We're going to point and the box is going to move and it's going to straighten out. So let's go ahead and save this. So here's our box. Let's reload. And you can see that it's rotated 90 degrees. It's a square, so it's a little hard to tell, but you can see by looking at the text that it is now 90 degrees rotated. And if we point, you can see what happens. It moved it using translate. Okay, and because we didn't say in the hover that we wanted it rotated, it changed it back to its original rotation. Okay, so we added the rotate, so it's 90 degrees. We point, and it transforms and goes back to normal as far as rotation. So that one is pretty much done. We are going to move on to more fun with transformations, because hopefully you guys are having fun with this. And let's see, we are going to open this one up. Now this one's got a lot more going on. So let's take a look at what we have so far. Okay, so I'm a rotating box, put me right side up. You can see it's displayed at an angle. We point, angle goes away. So that code is already in the file. So you can see we've got rotating box. Okay, and by default, it was at negative 45. And then we've got this hover state where we have it go to 0. So that code is in there. Basically, because you guys have already worked with rotation. Didn't think you had to do it again. But you'll notice that we have a couple more boxes defined. Okay, we've got IDs for a skewed box, and we've got an ID for a scaled box. Remember, the skewed one has the top, bottom, left, right at angles, and a scaled box basically will get larger or smaller. We don't have hover states defined yet. And we don't have the boxes down here in our HTML. So why don't we go ahead and define what the hover state is first. For the skewed box, the transform that we want is obviously we want it to skew. We're going to have it skew on the X. 30 degrees. Okay. And then for hover on scaled box, doing a transform on the scale. Now you can do scale X or scale Y, which is width and height, or if you want both, you just use scale. And then in parentheses, you give it a value for the width and the height. And that's how we're doing it. We're giving a value for the width, a value for the height. Okay, then down in our HTML, we actually have to create the boxes, and we're doing that using ID. So it's going to be very similar to rotating box. So I'm going to copy from the opening div through the closing on the rotating. We're just going to paste that twice. And then let me fix up, because I'm very anal about the alignment on my HTML. It's just, actually I'm like this with all programming languages because it's just easier to read it if things are aligned properly. So we've got rotating box done. The second one we want is our skewed box. And the third one should be the scaled box. And for the text, it should say, I am a skewed box. Point and I distort. And then I am a scaled box. Point and I get bigger. Okay, so at this point, we're going to save. Hopefully we didn't make any typos. And let's reload. Okay, so you can see we've got our 3 boxes. That code was there. Now let's point at skewed. Okay, so you can see how when we skew, and we skewed, we did a skew X. So that is moving the points along the bottom. Okay, and I'm a scale box. So you can see it's gotten so big that we can't even see the whole thing. Okay. And that's exactly what this page is supposed to do. So at this point, you are done, at least with the rotating and the more fun pages. So you could close those. And that brings us to the matrix. So what if you want to apply more than one transformation? That is where this matrix comes in, because the matrix lets you apply multiple transformations in one command. So you can actually give it up to 6 values, and the first value is scale X, that's horizontal. Then we've got skew Y and skew X. We've got scale Y. We've got translate X and Y, which lets you move. Scale Y is the vertical size, and then we've got skew Y, skew X, and that kind of makes it slanted. So we got 6 different values that we can actually play with. And to be honest, you'll probably have to look up the placement of these values unless you have a super good memory because they aren't in the most logical order. So what we're going to do down here in our VBox hover is key and transform. And you'll notice that all of these 2D transformations do start with transform. Okay, and because that's your property, and the value is matrix. And then in the matrix, we're going to do a 3, 0. You'll notice I'm putting commas between it, 0, 1, 440, and 440. So again, what these values are telling us The first value is scale X. So we're going to make it wider. We are not skewing because the second and third values are for skewing. We're not skewing. For scale Y, we have set that to 1. And then for the translate X and Y, we've got 440. So it's going to move and it's going to get a little bigger, basically, is what's going to happen. So let's save. And then let's take a look at this. So watch me move and resize. That's what we said it was going to do. And it's awfully quick, but you can see that we adjusted the scale X. We made that bigger, so it's much wider. And it moved down 440 because of translate Y, and it moved across 440 pixels because of translate X. And that is all we are going to be doing to this one. So make sure you save your changes and close the file.